Ambassador Bárcena, what would you say are the most important issues going on in between our two countries, Mexico and United States?
I think we have such a complex and a very wide agenda that there are many, many issues. But the most important ones, of course, are trade and investment, so the economic relationship in general. Mexico has become the first trading partner of the US. This has happened in the first months of 2019, and we think it's a trend that will continue to be there and even to grow. So in the context of our economic relationships, the ratification of USMCA is one of the priorities of the Mexican government this year. The Mexican Senate has already ratified, and we're waiting for the US Congress to pass it. Another area that is of great importance, it's everything that is related to migration. And when we speak about migration, is the situation of the Mexican community in the US, both documented and undocumented. Second is the Mexican migration to the US that, as you know, in the last years has been going down, and it's almost now a zero migration. That means more Mexicans are returning to Mexico than coming to the US. The common challenge that we have with Central American migration, particularly in the last 9 months, which is something that neither Mexico nor the US were expecting, neither the numbers or the different kind of migration that we are seeing, which is a family migration. Then another area of great importance is the border, because we have many challenges at the border, but we have a very vibrant border that is synonymous of creativity and innovation. But above all these issues that are very important, and of course all the collaboration in culture and education and scientific and technical exchanges, above all these issues, what is more important is people. It's how is the Mexican community and the Mexican American community contributing to the economy, the social aspects and the culture of the United States, and also the exchange of people that we have. We have almost 2 million Americans living in Mexico. So what is more important is to increase this exchange of people, this respect for each other, this reciprocity in the way we deal with each other.
Ambassador Bárcena, historically, we have two administrations, one to the far right and one to the far left, considered by many. What can you say on that regards? How are these two very extreme positions in the political spectrum and are working at the beginning of these administrations?
Yes, thank you, Patricia. I wouldn't like to classify as far right or far left. Let's say that there are two very nationalistic administrations, and but we have something that is very important. We have a common future, and we have agreements in many areas, and we see some issues from a different perspective. So the challenge that we have and that we are working in it, it's to emphasize the need to work together to address the common issues that we have in front of us with a constructive attitude based on mutual respect and on the concept of reciprocity. And if we identify the areas in which we can work together, for example, the ratification of USMCA, the increasing of trade, the increasing of investment, on how to solve issues of environmental issues at the border, then we can build a constructive agenda. In other areas, for example, in immigration, we have different points of view, but we know that we have common challenges. So let's say from two different points of view, where can we meet and work together for certain issues, like, as I said before, the challenge of the Central American migration. So the idea and the instructions that I received from President López Obrador is to avoid any confrontation with the current government of the United States. On the contrary, we need to find areas of agreement, areas of cooperation, and try to progress on those areas, so to avoid clashes that would not benefit anyone, and particularly clashes will only impact negatively, could have a negative impact on the Mexican community, which is the priority of the Mexican government.
Ambassador, one of the points where Mexico is looking to move forward with the United States is trade and is more business. Mm-hmm. However, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is moving the unions towards a growth and strength. Mm-hmm. Many instances in the United States think that in the United States is happening the opposite. Can this affect that relationship, that growth of business and trade in between the two countries?
Oh, it's a very good question. I haven't thought of it in that way. What I will tell you is that when we signed NAFTA in 1994, there was no chapter on labor issues. It was a parallel agreement or a side letter. Now USMCA, TEMEC in Mexico, has a specific chapter on labor and what are the issues of labor. So what we would say is that this chapter was negotiated and included because it was a demand from the unions and the Democrats of the US, and coincidentally, they have some of the same demands that the left in Mexico has been claiming for years. So now we have a new chapter on labor in USMCA and a new labor reform in Mexico that it's very progressive and that gives a lot of rights to unions for free and independent vote of workers. It would be quite ironic that Mexico progressed a lot on labor reform and that the US does not progress at the same pace, because what we need is a USMCA agreement that benefits not only big businesses, but also small and medium enterprises, which, by the way, are included also in USMCA. And also, we need an agreement, a trade agreement that will benefit at the end the workers, because we need workers that could earn more and that would have more capacity and more economic capacity, because then they are the main motors of the economy. So we need empowered workers, and we need that they are convinced that the trade and investment relationship between Mexico and the US and Canada, because we need not to forget Canada, is in benefit of our citizens and not only of the big business. And that is why we agree on the labor chapter, and that is why the Mexican government has adopted and it's implementing a transformative labor reform.
Ambassador, there is a concern among international instances regarding civil rights and the migrants from Central and South America, and the role that Mexico is playing in here, and the authorities can be hurting these families and these migrants that are trying to come to the United States. What would you tell to these instances regarding the efforts of the President of Mexico and his administration on respecting the civil rights of this migrant population?
Well, I would reiterate what I said at the beginning. The influx of people from Central America that we have seen in the last 8 months has been something unprecedented. So according to some studies, almost 1% of populations from Honduras and Guatemala have left their countries in the latest months. So this is something that neither the US, neither Mexico were expecting, and they are coming families. So what we found at our southern border is that we didn't know who was coming into Mexico. And if we didn't have the possibility of having a registration of who was coming into Mexico, that would mean that these people could be abused by traffickers or by people who violated human rights, and we wouldn't have known because we didn't know who was entering Mexico. So one of the priorities of the Mexican government has been to put order at the southern border. And to put order, that means that tell people you cannot come into Mexico and cross Mexico without registering yourself and without complying with the Mexican immigration laws. And for that, we have designed a series of special permits for the Central Americans to come to Mexico. And that is why we deploy the National Guard, which is a recently created military police in Mexico that it's very similar to the ones that exist in Europe. So, of course, there can always be a possibility that some of the implementation of these new measures could be considered or would infringe some rights of people, but it is the minimum. The order of President López Obrador is that all these process of ordering our southern border and registering people should be based on the respect for human rights. At the northern border, the situation is different. It's linked to what the efforts we're doing in the southern border, which is to put order and registration of people. But then people have crossed and they are at the northern border waiting to cross to the US to ask for asylum. And at the same time, we have another category of people that we are receiving based on humanitarian reasons. And these are people who are returned to Mexico that had already claimed asylum in the US, and that they will wait in Mexico until the asylum claims are adjudicated. So what we have then, it's a lot of pressure at our northern border because we have many people that we don't know for how long they will stay in Mexico, because the asylum processes in the US are very slow. So we have asked the US government to speed up the asylum processes in the US, and at the same time we're trying to adopt measures to give them shelter, the right to work for a period of time while they are waiting for the asylum claims, and to give them access to education and health. It's not easy because, for example, in Mexico, there are many jobs that could be filled by these Central American workers, but they are not necessarily at the border. They are in other states like San Luis Potosí, like Querétaro. So how do you move people from Tijuana to San Luis to work and then return them to Tijuana to be able to be on time in San Diego for their asylum hearing? So it poses a lot of logistic issues. Without any doubt, the chances that some infringement of human rights could happen are there, because there are huge amount of people, there are huge volumes of people, but the idea is to respect the human rights, and the idea is to help people based on humanitarian reasons. But helping people and respecting human rights is not synonymous of letting them do whatever they want. They have to respect the law and they have to register. So we're trying to work on that aspect, and we hope that this situation could be solved in the future. And of course, the Mexican government will always insist. We have US and Mexico, we have the obligation to work together in the southern part of Mexico and in Central America, so that there is sustainable development in those regions and that we address the root causes of migration. Only then we will be able to solve and guarantee the respect of human rights of people.
Ambassador, Wisconsin is a second commercial trade partner with Mexico.
Yes.
And there is an important Mexican community in our state. What will be your words for this community that even if we are so far to the north, continue trying to reach Mexico?
Well, first, it's true. The trade between Mexico and Wisconsin is $6.3 billion a year. Mexico is the second export market for Wisconsin in many areas, in manufacturers, in electronics, and also cheeses and dairy. and we are in general a very important trade partner for Wisconsin. So we look forward with the NAFTA and with the ratification of USMCA to continue to grow this trade relationship and also to continue to grow both the investment of Mexican companies here in Wisconsin, because very few people know that there are many Mexican companies invested in Wisconsin. NIMAC on the automotive sector, Alfa, Bimbo on the food and agri-food industry, and also the investment of Wisconsin companies in Mexico, like the ones of Rockwell and others that are in different parts of Mexico. And I know that the Hispanic community, in particular the Mexican American community and the Mexican community in Wisconsin, is growing rapidly. And I have to say to this community, I am very proud of you. You have been contributing to Wisconsin for many years. And today I had the privilege of meeting the mayor of Milwaukee, the vice governor of Wisconsin, and also some very distinguished leaders from the Mexican community here that are the owner of El Rey Supermarkets, and Salvador Carranza on the education system, Tere Mercado, Fiesta Mexicana, and said, what you have done is fantastic. You should be very proud. And what the mayor and the vice governor told me is that they are very happy and also very proud of the Mexican community. They are great contributors to the economy of Wisconsin, to the social development of Wisconsin, to the culture of Milwaukee, the restaurants. They are hard workers. They are getting more and more education. And we have identified areas that we need to work for the future. Bilingual education, the obtention of a driver's license for the Mexican community, the collaboration in all areas of culture and education, and also the very important issue that the Mexican community should answer the census. Don't be afraid, answer the census. It's very important that everybody knows how many Mexicans live in Wisconsin. And always, always think that Mexico is very proud of you, that in a way we lament that you had to migrate. We would love to have you back, but at least come for holidays, for tourism. Look always to Mexico. Be very proud of your culture. We are a great country with an amazing culture. And always be good citizens, good residents, and the hard workers that you are, and that make also Mexico and the US very proud of you. Thank you very much, Patricia. I am very thrilled to have had this interview. Thank you very much to PBS. Thank you very much to Wisconsin inhabitants, to Wisconsin authorities. It has been a privilege to be here. And above all, thank you very much to all the Mexicans and the Mexican community in Wisconsin. We have a consulate here at your orders, at your service, and we want to work with you, and we're very proud of you. And you have an open door and an open house in DC, and you're always welcome to Mexico, both the inhabitants of Wisconsin and the Mexican community. Thank you. Gracias.